Welcome to the Caffeinated Combat Awards for the 2020 year in MMA.
I thought you
I
were going to call it the Christmas special.
welcome back to the Christmas special. We're not that far away from Christmas, so I feel like it's in good taste to continue on the Christmas special
Yeah, it just happened.
heritage. Yeah.
Just
So
happened.
for this Christmas special, we are introducing the awards, the Caffeinated Combat Awards, the seal of approval. This is the biggest thing that someone could achieve in their lifetime.
The most
Yeah,
prestigious MMA
it
awards.
carries way too much weight to even describe. I can't even describe it to you.
Get
So
out of
yeah,
here, Ariel
well,
Helwani.
we
There's
got
some new kids in town.
we got a couple of topics that we could award some fighters or fighter, if you will. Best
hmm
fights of the year, best events of the year, favorite fighters of the year, the greatest knockouts, greatest submissions, greatest performance. You get the idea. We're gonna go over a lot of these topics and we're gonna give you guys the best that the UFC had to offer.
And
Not
I want to say something real quick. Full disclosure. So Matt came up with these topics. I like them. I agreed with them. But we have not discussed our picks for these topics. Like
yes.
if you and I have the same picks, if Matt and I have the same picks, it's purely coincidental. Hopefully we won't for the sake of
Hmm.
interesting conversation, but there's definitely going to be some crossover. But that's not intentional. We haven't discussed our winners, our picks for any of these categories. We've only discussed the categories themselves. Uh, we've established our picks internally. At least I did. I just keep them all up in my head. I didn't write shit down
This
because
guy's got a memory.
I have a
The
memory.
CTE won't hold you back.
And I'll be honest, there's a few that I just haven't decided on
I
yet.
I
We're gonna
also agree with you there. There's a few that
we're gonna
I have nothing.
we're gonna pick them as we go. We're gonna figure it out.
Yeah.
We're gonna
So,
figure it out together. And I think there's wiggle room in these categories. You know,
oh, easily.
there's
It's the
there's
beauty
there's
of it.
conversation to be had. Like I was thinking this morning. So, okay, we're jumping ahead real quick, but I want to say this. I was thinking this morning about best fighter of 2020. Wait, favorite fighter of 2020. Wait, those are two different things. I think you need to distinguish those
Hmm.
because my favorite fighter of 2020 is one person, but who I think is objectively the best fighter of 2020, put on the best performances against the best competition under the biggest events. That's a different person. So those are two different. We'll get to it. We'll figure it out. We'll discuss
We're
it.
gonna figure
Okay.
it out, and if we don't, we'll cancel
Everything's
the
flexible
podcast. You know?
here on Caffeinated Combat.
Yeah. Now, speaking of probably the biggest overlap we're gonna have, greatest fight of the year.
Hmm.
So this is there's kind of three main fights that is universally recognized as the greatest fights of the year, and obviously Joanna Jędrzejczyk versus Zhang Weili. I mean, you can't go wrong with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was just a beautiful performance on both of them. And also you have Dan Hooker versus Dustin Poirier. Same kind of thing, just an absolute slugfest back and forth, very competitive. And now we had a nice surprise just very recently with Brandon Moreno and Davison Figueiredo.
Yes.
Those are my top three fights of the year. And I'm guessing yours are very similar. Am I correct in
Yes.
saying that?
Okay, so here's my pick. My favorite fight of 2020 is Dustin Poirier, Dan Hooker. But with that being said, as you mentioned, those other two are close second. I think Zhang Weili and Joanna Jędrzejczyk is the greatest women's MMA contest of all time. I don't think there's much competition there. I think it is the best women's MMA fight there is. And then I think Davison Figueiredo and Brandon Moreno is the greatest flyweight fight of all time. Uh, Maybe the greatest flyweight championship fight of all time, but I also can't recall just flyweight fight non-championship that I've enjoyed more than that fight. But Dustin Poirier, Dan Hooker is still my number one because it there was just that wonderful back and forth um and the stakes were so high for both of these guys. I really like both of them just as fighters, as people. I'm a huge Dan Hooker and Dustin Poirier fan. I think they're both fantastic. Um, and there was just two guys that went out there, gave it all they had, left nothing, held nothing back, and just left a piece of themselves in the octagon. And it's probably it's got to be one of my favorite fights ever of any year. The only other fight I could think of that comes close uh, in terms of my enjoyment is Robbie Lawler, Rory McDonald 2. Other than that, I mean, Dan Hooker, Dustin Poirier is every single thing you want in a fight. The reason I'm not picking the other two is Brandon Moreno and Davison Figueiredo ended in a draw, and there was the whole low blow thing, and that for me I still loved it. It was still great. I still think it's the greatest flyweight fight ever, but it takes it down just a peg. And then Zhang Weili and Joanna, the only reason I'm not picking that for best fight of 2020 is because I don't think it was as competitive as Dan Hooker, Dustin Poirier. I think when that fight ended, we clearly knew that Zhang Weili was the winner. And hey, I'm grateful that the judges got it right, because you never know with them. But that is why Dustin Poirier Dan Hooker is my fight of 2020 and one of my favorite fights, probably top 3 ever.
I would agree with everything you just said. I think honestly, Dan Hooker and Dustin Poirier takes number one for me, for all the reasons you just spelled out. But I think it's funny to think that the 2 of the 3 best fights of the year were women's strawweight and men's flyweight. If you told me that at the end of 2019, I'd think you were crazy, because
It's a good point.
those divisions, they're fine, but they don't really compete with the best of the best. With lightweight and onward in the men's divisions. So I think it's nice that we have some actual diversity here in 2020. It's just the year that keeps on surprising us, and I guess I have to thank it for that. The one thing it did right, give us some variety. But yeah, I would say the best fight of the year though would be Dana White versus coronavirus, because he seemed to handle it very, very well, I would
Dana
say.
White versus the media.
Oh, the
The
media too.
liberal
Dana White,
media.
he destroys the liberal media on a daily basis.
You saw that video, right, that he put out that was bashing he put it
Yeah.
out like somewhat recently. Yeah, bashing all the media and stuff. It was
Hey man, I gotta. He says some weird stuff, yeah, but like you gotta give him credit. He did keep this sport alive throughout the entire thing. I mean, minus the first month, but no, that's you can give it to that. So Dana White had 11 out of the 12 rounds with coronavirus. That's a pretty good ratio right there. That's a solid record. I like that a lot.
It started off a little rough,
Yeah.
but they figured it out.
He
And
adjusted veteran adjustments here by Dana and the
luckily,
UFC.
for the UFC's sake, for the fighters' sake, for everyone's sake, I don't think there were any disasters COVID related, right?
Right.
There were fights that got screwed, and this and that and the other thing, but um the thing that I feared that would happen, I guess it could still happen into 2021, but I feel like they got their shit figured out now. My fear was we were going to have an event, and then a week or two later we were going to find out everyone who was there and competed had COVID, and they competed with COVID, and it was running rampant, and there were fighters who tested positive after competing. That was my fear, and as far as I know, that didn't happen. If it did, we didn't hear about it, and I wouldn't be surprised if they kept that shit under wraps. But I guess their system worked for the most part, right?
Yeah.
Like, guys who tested positive did not compete. They were isolated. I mean, it seemed like they did a good job. Like, they did it well. At first, it was a little dicey. It seemed like they were being reckless and irresponsible, and they were being criticized for it. And to some degree, I think it was right, rightfully so. But then it also got to the point where I think a lot of people in the media were just angry. They were criticizing because it was something to write about and something to report on. I think everyone was kind of shitty
Mhm.
throughout this whole thing. I think the UFC did some shitty stuff. I think the media did some shitty stuff. I think they were both right in their own regards. I don't know. It was a mixed bag. But at the end of the day, like you said, we got some good variety out of it. We got some great fights. We got some standout performances, standout stars. we're, as mixed martial arts fans, as lovers and fans of the sport, we have to be grateful to some degree that we got to see our sport happen and take no hit. Like, it's not like, oh, we're watching UFC, but it's like shit UFC because 2020 COVID. All no, like we were watching like high end quality stuff. Like everything was, the quality was still magnificent, if not better in some degree. No fans. Yeah, it kind of sucks, but it's also kind of cool that you get to hear everything that's happening, and it just felt like everything was it was firing on all cylinders.
Hmm.
And I've watched some other sports handle this pandemic and how it's been going, like NFL, for example. Dude, football has absolutely sucked this year. Football is trash this year. Like, it's just not as entertaining as it once was. And luckily, I feel like MMA was one of the most least affected sports throughout all this. So yeah, we do have to give Dana some credit. We have to give the UFC some
Hmm.
credit.
And I also wanted to mention on this topic, a lot of people mention Justin Gaethje versus Tony Ferguson as fight of the year. And I just have to ask, how are you going to
Yeah,
say that's fight of the year? A
I
good
don't agree
fight,
with
yeah,
that.
no, I don't agree with that at all. Not just because I'm a Tony Ferguson fanboy, and I am, but any fight where it's not competitive at all, which it wasn't, I hate to say it. Um,
Hmm.
how is that fight of the year? A good fight to me is one that's extremely competitive, where the fighters continuously adapt to one another and, push themselves to the absolute limit for 25 minutes or 15 minutes or however long the fight is. And a good fight for me is one where you go, I don't, that was so intense. I don't know who won that. That's razor thin. Both people just laid it all out there. This was a fantastic matchup. Wow. It's not, oh, Tony Ferguson died and his career is going downhill. I don't see the point of that. And again, I'm not just saying that because I'm a huge Tony Ferguson fan. Give me any fight, you know what I mean, where that happens, and I'm gonna be like, that's not the best fight. Yeah, it's a good performance. I don't think it's a good fight. You show me
Right.
Coley Covington and Tyron Woodley, I say, damn, that Covington had a fantastic performance. Good job on him. That was a pretty shit fight though, and
Yeah.
bad matchmaking, not on the UFC's part, but just on Tyron Woodley's part because he seems to have obviously fallen off. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. I don't know why people like to think that fights that have no competition are the best fights of the year. And even the UFC put out on they released a video, top like 3 or 5 fights of the year. They put Tony Ferguson and Justin Gaethje on there. And I guess it's just because no one expected it, but I don't see how that gives it the right to be up there with something like, Dustin Poirier and Dan Hooker and these other fights we mentioned. Yeah, I just
Yeah,
wanted
I
to
don't
just
I
wanted to
don't quite
mention
get
that.
it
I
either.
I, I don't know. It's weird. It
I I think you could definitely say one of the best performances of the year in Justin Gaethje, but yeah, I wouldn't
yeah,
categorize it
no.
as one of the best fights of the year because it just, as you said, it just wasn't all that competitive.
Yeah.
Um,
So
but go ahead.
overall, I would have to say Dustin Poirier, Dan Hooker, you get the Caffeinated Combat Best Fight of the Year award. You could take that home
Yay!
with you. You can live with that for the rest of your life, and you could finally die happy. What can I
Are we
say?
mailing them something like a
No,
trophy?
no, they'll just have to.
Uh,
They'll see it.
yeah, yeah, they'll see
They'll
this.
stumble across this.
Yeah.
So, oh, did you want to mention anything else?
No, I'm done. I'm good on
Okay,
that.
but
I'm ready to
so
move on.
what is the next topic you'd like to move on to? Let's
I
throw a
guess we
wild
could
card.
do best male fighter of the year, and we
Hmm.
could do best female after that.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
Throwing some equality,
Well,
caffeinated combats way.
my best male fighter. So as I said, I have a favorite and I have a best. My favorite fighter of 2020 is Kevin Holland. I think he's one of your breakout stars of the year. He has been ultra active. I think it was, how many times did he fight in 2020? Like
I think it was
5?
5, yeah, and he was going for the 6th to break the record, but they couldn't get a contract together.
Yeah, so he has been just super active. He's got a terrific personality. He's very entertaining to watch, and he had one of my favorite knockouts of the year against Jacare Souza. Off his back, in his Jacare's in his guard. He swings his leg out, fucking catapults himself in the Jacare and knocks him out from his back. Uh, I mean, just unheard of KO. But if we're talking about best fighter of 2020, a guy who has taken on a plethora of competition and fighting at the highest level and doing extremely well, it's got to be Davison Figueiredo for me. Um, this guy single-handedly revitalized the flyweight division, in my opinion. So Cejudo retires. Davison takes on Joey B and just absolutely annihilates him in the first fight. But Davison misses weight. So bad start for him. I remember really disliking Davison actually when this first happened because he beat Joey B and I love Joey B. I wanted to see Joey B become champ. Beats him, but oh wait, he was overweight. There was a freaking clash of heads in the fight. It was just surrounded in controversy. And then, whoops, flyweight's a mess again. We have no champion. Kind of sucks. But then the rematch happens, and he just brutalizes Joseph Benavidez and gets one of the sickest rear naked chokes I've ever seen. Like, terrifying. The way Joey B's eyes rolled back into his head. It was nuts. It was a terrific, terrific performance. Then he goes out there and fights, who was it, Diego Fajeda? I think that's who.
Yes.
Let me
That
make sure.
sounds
Or
familiar.
no, Alex Perez. He fought Alex.
We were both off, yeah.
Yeah, it was an unmemorable fight
Yeah.
because Davison went in there with ease, and I think it was a guillotine he put him out with. Then makes the quickest turnaround in title fight history to fight Brandon Moreno in the greatest flyweight competition of all time. And of course, there was the kick through the balls, which ended up making it a draw because Davison got deducted a point, which I think rightfully so, had to do that. And we're undoubtedly going to see a rematch between those two in 2021. But Davison Figueiredo is my best fighter of 2020. I think this guy just has done wonders for the flyweight division, and I I think he might be a big star if he keeps this up, if he keeps this work rate up and keeps putting on such impressive performances. I think he's going to be a real big deal to just mainstream audiences. He hits like a fucking train, which is very uncommon for that weight class, and that just it just makes for sensational fights. So that's my best fighter of 2020. But my personal favorite, I got to go with my boy Kevin Holland because he was doing some wild shit all year, and I was a big fan of it. And I got really excited every time I saw Kevin Holland perform. And we talked about him a million times on this freaking podcast because he
deserves
competing.
it. He deserves
Yeah.
it. Like, what a guy. Mine are very similar. I had to choose between for my favorite fighter of the year. Obviously, this was a tough one because and this is the year where I find activity to be a huge part in things, and I'm sure everyone else does too. This is one of the first years where you see fighters, much like Kevin Holland, obviously, who just mentioned, fight so many times a year over the average, which is usually 3 or 4 a year. And I had to choose between Kevin Holland, obviously, Davison Figueiredo, and Khamzat for my favorite. And largely, that was also on my list of the best fighters of the year. I can't put Khamzat on that list just because we haven't really seen him against competition that is equal to these other fighters that I just mentioned. Like Khamzat, he's a huge name in the sport now. He's a big star. He fought 3 times in 2020 or 4. I don't know. I think he fought 3 times in the UFC in 2020, and he dominates every time. But you don't see him fighting someone like Jacare Souza and absolutely obliterating him like Kevin Holland did. So I have to give Kevin Holland my seal of approval here. I would have to agree. He's probably my favorite fighter of the year. I did not know who Kevin Holland was before 2020. Going into 2021 now, I will never forget Kevin Holland. This is a guy that just talks so much, so entertaining. Is such a nice, I wouldn't say nice personality, he's such a fun personality, a real fighter spirit. And I just love the fact that he likes to get in there and just fight anybody. And fighters say they're gonna do it all the time, but usually they don't. This is a guy that will do it anytime, any place. And I just love the story of Kevin Holland, where he came from. Dana White obviously mentioned it. It's just he's such a well-rounded fighter, such a good story, good personality. So he's got to be my favorite. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, Kyle. I think the best fighter of the year was also Davidson Figueiredo. I mean, come on,
Oh.
you can't go wrong with Davidson in
Hmm.
this category. The guy, like you said, revitalized the entire division. This was a division that I had no interest in after Henry left. Henry was the lifeblood of 125 after Demetrius got axed. And I never thought flyweight would be fun again. And here comes this Brazilian bullfighter just knocking people down like bowling pins. And I also disliked him at first because of Joey B. Rest in peace. He's still unconscious to this day in the octagon. That fight freaked me out. The way he screamed when he woke up and all that stuff. I just, like you said, freaked me out. But yeah, come on. Davidson just did so much for the sport this year. Put his belt on the line. How many days notice was it, or after his first fight?
It
What
was
was it? It was
like
like 2 weeks maybe.
something like that.
It's
Yeah, something
insane.
absurd.
It was a record breaker to be sure. Um, and I would like to give an honorable mention as well to Habib Nurmagomedov. Obviously, that he
Ah,
had a tough year.
I was gonna do it
Yeah,
too.
he
I
had
was
a.
gonna do it too.
There's not many fighters that deserve recognition like he does in a year where he loses his father like that and comes in and
Yeah.
dominates Justin Gaethje with a seemingly new fighting style, specifically adapted towards Justin Gaethje. You can't just sit back and strike with a guy like him. You just got to push the pace forward and just smother him completely. Don't let him get a breath. And that's what he did. I have to respect Khabib. He lost his only motivation to fight, his greatest mentor in life, and he comes back and defeats largely his greatest opponent to stay undefeated and quotation marks retire. Not sure what's going
Hmm.
on there, but yeah, I definitely an honorable mention to Khabib, just because of what he went through and what kind of year he had and how he pushed through adversity and you know he came back. But I would put him higher if he had more than one fight.
Right.
That's the
Yes.
deciding factors here. Just activity is the biggest thing right now.
Yes. I
That's what
agree.
sets people apart in 2020. So yeah, definitely got to give it to Kevin Holland and Davidson. So far, we have the exact same picks. I love it.
Well, we might be a little different in this next one because I'm going to pull a fast one on you,
Okay.
Matthew. You know how I just went on that whole rant about how best and favorite are two
Yes,
different things?
I do.
Well, I'm going to fucking take all that back.
Let's hear
So,
it.
my best and my favorite fighter of 2020, female fighter, women's MMA fighter of 2020 is Zhang Weili. My best and my favorite. So, why do I say that? Well, when you think about best female fighters today, who do you think of? You think of Amanda, you think of Valentina Shevchenko, and you probably think of Zhang Weili as well. Well, to no fault of their own, Amanda and Valentina have just not had great fights this year,
Yeah, no, you're 100%
because
right. Yeah.
their competition is just not there. Amanda absolutely dominates Felicia Spencer in a fight that's just not competitive at all. Not even really all that fun to watch because you knew the outcome going in and you were correct. Like it and then Valentina just has a few kind of duds,
Yeah,
kind of
little bit.
dud fights, and nothing really interesting going on there at women's flyweight right now. I think that's going to change in 2021, but women's strawweight, on the other hand, is on fire with things happening. You have your first Chinese champion in Zhang Weili, and then she puts on the greatest women's MMA fight of all time against Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and is just an incredibly dominant champion and looks very scary for anyone at women's strawweight. I mean, I'm looking at the top five right now: Rose, Joanna, Yan Xiaonan, Carla Esparza, Nina Ansaroff. I mean, those they are all five of them are gonna have a real tough time with Zhang Weili, like a really tough time. I think that's a champion that is here to stay. So that is why she is my best and my favorite.
I respect that. I would have to throw out Amanda Ebos right there. I mean, come on,
Mm,
can't. She's an up and comer that's really exciting.
that's a good
She's
one.
fighting very soon as well in 2021, and she had
Good
a
one.
phenomenal 2020. She only had 2 fights, I believe, but most women didn't have more than 2 fights or more than one fight. Like you said, even the champions have been largely inactive. So
Hmm.
it's nice to see some new blood, though. She put a number on Paige Van Zandt, and she's
Yes.
not necessarily a can like a lot of people say she is, especially on the ground where she got defeated. So Amanda
Hmm.
Hubas defeated her in her own area of dominance, and I think that's really impressive. And I'm excited because she brings such a fun energy to it. She's so happy to be attacking people, and
Hmm.
it's nice. I'm
Love
excited to
Amanda
see her.
Hebos. Absolutely love her.
Yeah, but yeah, I would say other than Zhang and Rose, I mean, she's probably my favorite this year, just because of the inactivity in a lot of them. And again, not saying she's super active, just she's got a nice new flavor to her, and I like
But
that.
who is your best, Matthew?
I
If
like
Amanda's your favorite, Amanda Hebos is your favorite. Who is
Zhang
your best?
Weili did phenomenal against Joanna, but I really liked watching Rose fight Jessica
Oh yeah,
Andrade.
Jessica
I
Andrade.
did like that revenge story because
Mm,
she got blasted in the
she
first
got
fight. She got slammed.
slammed.
She got Brock Lesnar real hard, and no one expected that because she was winning the fight pretty well before that happened. So in the rematch, everyone obviously expected it to go that way again, but there was always that thought: what if it happens again? What if Jessica does her thing again and slams her?
Hmm.
So I think that was she. I would have to say, other than Wei Li, I would say Rose is probably my favorite. Um, and that this spot would usually go to someone like Amanda Nunes or Valentina, but they haven't fought the best competition, so
Hmm. They're in a kind of a
yeah,
almost a Demetrius Johnson
yeah, they're
position
just too
where
good to be competitive.
they're too
I don't know
good
how to
and they're
explain
in
it.
divisions that just really aren't all that deep,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Also, Amanda was out for a while because she and Nina just had a child. So,
Congratulations, Amanda.
yeah, good for them.
Yeah,
Uh, and then Valentina had a, who did she
she
fight?
fought
I think it
Jennifer
was
Maya, and
really boring fight
yeah, Joe
from what I
Rogan thought it
remember.
was very exciting though. I do remember that he was saying that Jennifer was well. Every time Jennifer would land something, he'd freak out like a mad lad, and
Yeah, well, I think it's
yeah,
just because everyone expected
yeah,
Valentina to butcher her.
yeah.
And when she doesn't, I mean, that doesn't exactly make for a good fight, in my opinion.
Yeah,
But
it was nice to see some competition where she'd fight back, but I think Joe gets a bad rap when he gets like criticized for that, just because, like you said, we expect Valentina to land on her, but we don't expect Jennifer to land on Valentina. So obviously, you're
hmm,
going to be more excited when the unexpected happens. That's just
right.
human nature. I mean, maybe it
Hmm.
doesn't make for good commentating unbiasedly, but Joe Rogan's always going to be a biased commentator. It's Joe Rogan. Come on, look at the man. 5 feet tall, big attitude. He's got great ideas, and I don't think we should criticize him for doing exactly what we would do per se.
Yeah. So, Matthew, the question is, what would you like to do first? Would you like to do greatest knockout, greatest sub, or just greatest overall performance?
Hmm. I guess we could start with the greatest performance. That's probably the longest list
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, I guess I could start. Hopefully, we don't have the same exact picks, but I mentioned him before. Colby Covington obviously is a
Oh,
huge.
okay.
He has some huge performances. And look what he did to my man Tyron Woodley.
Mm-hmm.
He shattered his rib mid-fight. I don't know if that was intended. Probably not, but you look at Usman and Burns, and I don't believe they finished Woodley, did they? So I guess you could say Colby is the only person to finish Tyron Woodley.
Yeah,
Um,
I guess
and
so.
and Tyron might look like a pushover, but he's not. He's still
Former
a
champ.
grade A fighter, a veteran, and you can't take that beatdown that Colby put on him lightly. That's a big thing. Even if he's on a downward spiral, that's still huge on Colby's part. And I
Mm-hmm.
think he's gonna have a good time against Jorge if that ever gets
Mm.
made. That's gonna be a grudge match.
It's a
I
great
hope they
fight.
make up after that. Um, Justin Gaethje, obviously, Tony Ferguson. How could you not mention that? That was a performance from heaven. How could you get better than absolutely obliterating Tony Ferguson with strikes? I mean, Tony's known for cutting you up and dominating you on the feet. And obviously, he's known for doing that everywhere, just with wrestling, with BJJ. He's just a super
Hmm.
well-rounded guy. And to basically nullify every single aspect of Tony Ferguson's game, that's something that we've never seen before. I mean, we're seeing it more often now, but even Tony had a huge edge on Charles Oliveira when he was fighting him on the feet before his arm, snapped. He was at least being competitive with Charles in the first round on the feet. But there was just basically nothing in Justin Gaethje other than a knockdown at the end of, I think it was the second round or first round, which was great. But come on, I mean, look at the way he finished Tony. Like,
Yeah.
it sickens me. It does, as Tony's biggest fan. But I can't not give that to Justin Gaethje. Another one is Habib against Justin. Coming full
Yeah.
circle here. How could you not mention that as well? A perfectly tailored game plan to nullify everything Justin Gaethje has and to smother him out of existence and to take him down and finish him in the second round. And nobody expected that. Ally Quinta went 5 rounds with Khabib. Yeah, and Justin's a far better fighter than Ally Quinta in every regard. So
Every time anyone ever talks about Habib dominating someone, the question always is, well, just how good is Ally Quinta?
yeah, I think
Because
Ally
Ally
Quinta's
Quinta
awesome.
probably gave Habib the most competitive fight of his entire career. But I have to say, my best performance lies with Charles Oliveira against Tony Ferguson. And that is because we saw Justin mess him up on the feet, which I think was really impressive. But then we saw Charles mess him up on the ground, which I think is somehow even more
Yeah,
impressive. Um, and Charles just came in there and I think shocked everyone. We were all a little wary of Tony Ferguson after that. Just we were like, oh, well, how is he gonna come back from this? He took a bad beating, and he just didn't look good at all. And I think we were all wary of that. But then Charles just puts on this star-studded performance that I think honestly puts him in a title picture. I think it puts him in title conversation. So I might be expressing some recency bias here. In fact, I definitely
I
am,
think we are with
because
everything, to be honest with you. That's kind of hard not to.
it's hard not to. And but for me, the most shockingly dominant performance of 2020 was Charles Oliveira. Habib is definitely up there. Habib, uh, maybe my favorite submission of 2020 because of the way he took Justin Gaethje's back. It's one of the slickest back takes ever.
Hmm.
It's just so cool. I could watch that back take over and over and over and over again. Um, but I'm skipping ahead real quick. My favorite submission, still triangle chokes, has to be Jimmy Flick with his flying triangle that he landed just very recently. Um, I just love flying submissions because they almost never happen, but when they do, I think they're just so freaking cool and awesome. Like when DJ landed that flying armbar against Ray Borg many many moons ago. So my submission of the year has to be Jimmy Flick's flying triangle. I thought that shit was so cool. But my favorite performance of the year is Charles Oliveira. That armbar he got was insane.
That
If
was,
that fight went a second
yeah.
longer, that arm was
I
popping.
think
I
that
mean,
arm is,
literally a second longer.
yeah.
That was it. Um, but yeah, do you have a favorite submission of 2020?
I wanted to say Jack Hermanson versus. Oh, what's okay? How can I not remember this man's name? He gave Israel Adesanya a huge beating. What the hell is his name?
Oh,
Middleweight. Oh my god, I love him too.
you talking about Kelvin
Yeah,
Gastelum?
Kelvin Gastelum. Was that in
Yeah,
2019 or 2020? Jack
I
Hermanson
can't
defeating him.
remember.
I think it was early 2020, and if it wasn't, we're gonna say it was. I loved to see Jack Hermanson submit him, and nobody expected that.
It was 2020. It was July
Okay.
2020. Got a heel hook.
Yeah, after what Calvin did to Israel, we were all just like, hey, this man's got it all. He's got the complete picture. But we didn't see him on the ground versus a specialist like Jack Hermanson. And I know it wasn't the flashiest submission, but I just think it was the most professional submission. Jack went in there like a professional. He went in, he did what he needed to do with the least amount of energy expended and the least amount of bullshit, and he just got it done. And I have to respect his urgency and just
Very
how
economical.
Yeah, it was economical. It was like he was going to it was a business plan when you think of it. So I would say that's my favorite sub. I did want to mention favorite another contender or two on the favorite performances. There's so many good fights this year, but obviously we just had Stephen Thompson versus Jeff Neal. I think that was a performance from. I mean, how could you get better than what Stephen did? He hit and he didn't get hit, even on one leg. He did that game plan beautiful. That's basically what MMA is. That's what boxing is. Combat sports is what it's all about. And Stephen Thompson takes that to the next level. He strikes and has the defense of someone that I've never seen before. I think it's just his karate style. Lets him zip in and out at a moment's notice, attack extremely awkwardly at very vicious and unpredictable angles. And I think his game plan it's just a lot for most fighters out there. And I mean, you even saw him do this to someone like Anthony Pettis before he got obliterated, but he was dominating Anthony Pettis, who is he's a fantastic striker before he got obliterated. So I think Stephen Thompson is still a big problem for that division, even if a lot of people are counting him out because of his recent blunders. So definitely Stephen Thompson versus Jeff Neal. And also I can't forget Brian Ortega versus the Korean Zombie. That was an absolute beatdown. Not expected that. I didn't expect that at all, because the Korean Zombie is essentially a far better striker than Brian Ortega. I mean, Brian Ortega is mostly a submission specialist. He's got very good hands on him. You saw what he did to Frankie Edgar. But then you watch him fight Max Holloway, where Max is teaching him how to strike during the fight. And you think maybe he's not at that level. So you go into this thinking, okay, it's probably going to be competitive, but I would definitely give Korean Zombie the edge in probably every round on the feet. And I think Brian will have the edge on the ground. That's a classic matchup, submission specialist versus striker. But you see Brian Ortega transform into a volume striker that actually has some decent power to it. Korean Zombie, if I recall correctly, did not know where he was after the second round. He was all sorts of confused, didn't know the round, didn't know just basic information about the fight. So Brian Ortega doesn't fight very often at all after what happened with Max Holloway. But
2-year layoff.
It's going to be, I think it was. It's going to be very exciting to see him in 2021 with this newfound style that he has. Just this intense striking game that he developed. So I would definitely say that those are my favorites.
There's one we're forgetting.
What do you got?
Israel Adesanya, Paulo Costa. Magnificent.
That was a magnificent performance, yeah.
I mean, perfect.
I forgot about that because I repressed it from my mind.
A perfect performance. He absolutely fooled him on the feet.
Yeah.
Apollo had no idea what to do. Incredibly dominant performance from Israel Adesanya. I think probably the best striker in the sport today. There's one more we're forgetting.
There's so many good ones.
Jesus, this was early in the year. Conor McGregor, Donald Cerrone.
Yeah. That was genius. No one expected the shoulder strikes.
Nobody expects the
that.
Shoulder.
No.
Yeah, I mean, just absolutely obliterated Cowboy Cerrone. I don't think the best performance of 2020, because Cowboy is a guy that, he's been a gatekeeper for such a long time, and I think is at the tail end of his career and has so many ups and downs and, this, that, and the other thing. But you got to give Conor credit. That was a terrific performance. Landed him a performance of the night bonus because Conor definitely needs that 50K.
That money,
He's struggling financially right now.
You can also say Kamzat versus Gerald Mearshart. He just went in, he took him out, and then he just walked away. That's it. One punch.
Could certainly be the best knockout of 2022. One of the best knockouts of 2020. Speaking of which, Matthew, what is your favorite knockout of 2020?
Okay, so I don't want to I don't want to sound like, the mainstream media here when I say
You're gonna say
Joaquin
Joaquin
Buckley, but
Buckley.
I would say Cody Garbrandt is definitely my favorite of the
Oh,
year. That
okay.
off the cage right hook from hell,
Yeah.
that was something to
Werewolf Cody.
behold. That made me stand up and start screaming. I was
Yeah.
never so excited because Cody Garbrandt, I know he defeated my lifeblood, Dominic Cruz, and I'll never forgive him for that. But I love Cody. He might have the attitude and the personality of a chode, but like he's such a fun fighter to watch. So other than his personality, his fighting style, his strange power, it's exciting. He's a glass cannon. He can't take hits, but he could bang, bro. He could bang.
Mhm.
But
He'll
yeah,
be bang,
Joaquin
bro.
Buckley also. I mean, how could you not mention that? That was just
Yeah.
that was a once in a lifetime thing right there. And watching that live, I'll never forget. I looked down for a split second, and I looked back up, and who was it that he knocked out? It was one of the contender guys,
Impa
right? And
Kasaganai.
Kasagnai was just standing in the middle of the octagon, maybe like 10 or 11 feet away from Joaquin Buckley, and I was like, oh, they separated, and then he just collapsed and then
Yeah.
died, and I was like, did he actually just have a heart attack? What just happened? And he threw his hands up in the air, Joaquin. I was like, what just happened? Are you celebrating another man's cardiac arrest? And I was just super confused in that split second moment before I saw the replay and the commentary. So yeah, that was a fun one. How about you?
um, Geez, this is tough for me.
It is.
Because, God damn it, I'm gonna have to just keep sucking him off this whole podcast. But Kevin Holland's knockout over Jacare Souza,
Yes, that
I
was that
loved
was
it. I
spicy.
loved it so much. It was so great. Of course, Joaquin against Impa Kasaganai. It's awesome. It's great. Joaquin is getting all the accolades in the world for it. Also, maybe a fight between him and, God damn it, what's his name? James Krause. I love that. I hope that happens in 2021 because those two do not like each other at all. But beside the point, um, it's got to be Kevin Holland's knockout over Jacare. I just, off the back knockout. I mean, you never see it. Like the whole catching the kick thing. It's awesome, but just freaking slingshotting yourself out of the guard position, out of your full guard position into a knockout blow, and then putting, just quite literally folding Jacare, unlike anything I've ever seen. So that's my knockout of the year. More Kevin Holland, because I just can't stop talking about Kevin Holland. I mean,
How could you not?
he's the foundation of this podcast.
He is. He founded
there's
it.
a few things we always talk about on this. It seems like we always talk about on this podcast. We talk about Kevin Holland doing something awesome and being really active. We talk about Alistair being an old man but still being awesome, and we talk about Anthony Smith getting fucked up.
And John Jones. Always talking about John Jones.
Do we always talk about John? I
Because
guess
John Jones
so.
is always doing something.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, that is actually my biggest robbery of the year is John Jones and Dominic Reyes. I think Dominic Reyes won that fight. So that's my biggest robbery of 2020. I don't know if we're doing that category, but there
I
you have
agree
it.
with you completely. I mean, come on. It's hard to say that John Jones isn't fleeing his division because of his most recent fights. Thiago Santos, Dominic Reyes. You could argue that they won the fights, so how could you not say that, John might be evacuating? It's like the Berlin
Maybe.
bombings. He's in Berlin right now. He's trying to leave Berlin. Or no, not Berlin. That was I'm messing up my
Are you
my
thinking of
European
London?
cities. I'm thinking of London, yeah. All right, enough about the Luftwaffe. Yeah, other than that,
Matthew.
I would say Francis Ngannou and Rosenstruik.
Yes.
That was a big
Yeah.
one. That
Ridiculous.
not the best technique. Actually, no, that was fantastic technique, just not the most defensively sound. Just rushing your opponent, flailing your hands wildly. I can't help but wonder what would happen if he did that to Stipe. That would would Stipe be able to survive the barrage that Francis attacks with like that? I don't know. That's gonna be a
I
fun
think he
fight
would.
to watch in 2021. I think that Stipe
Francis
would.
and Stipe. Yeah.
That's gonna be. I think it'll be a different story. but I think it'll be very competitive throughout the entire thing.
Matthew, we have to do one of my favorite categories that you proposed. Uh, and I'm gonna let you go first on this because you proposed it, and I'm not quite sure what it means, but I think I'll have a better understanding after you talk about it. And that's biggest train wrecks of the year.
Okay, so
I just talk
yeah,
a bit about the biggest train
there's a lot of
wrecks.
train wrecks, not just Bellator, but train wrecks everywhere in MMA.
Okay.
So my biggest train wreck has to be Tito Ortiz versus Chuck Liddell 3. And I know what you're thinking. That took place almost 2 years ago. But we're still feeling its effects and how poorly that the Golden Boys promotion is portraying the sport of MMA. And I think that carries its weight years ahead. So I still think that was one of the biggest train wrecks of 2020, even though it happened in
Okay.
2018. You can't not mention that for the next 10 years at least, as a
Okay.
contender. But also can't talk about this without mentioning my favorite fighter, Tony Ferguson, doing super well.
That's where I thought you
Um,
were gonna go with it,
this
and that
man,
was
yeah,
my personal
yeah,
train wreck of
yeah. I'll
2020.
let you
Was
talk about Tony. My favorite train wreck of 2020, and just because I think this guy's a prick, is Sean O'Malley fighting Marlon Vera.
you
And
don't like
I,
Sean O'Malley?
I don't like the fact that he will not accept his victory. I applaud him for having such a strong will to not accept his loss. I just think he's such a cuck. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. He pisses me off when he speaks. He acts like he's better than everyone, even if he's not, and he's clearly not.
And you
And
love Cheeto.
I do like Cheeto a lot. And to see Cheeto blast this man out of existence, I mean, he was unconscious. His eyes were closed. He was laying back with his arms at his side, taking ground and pound punches. And I know you're thinking this is because of a leg that got messed up during the fight. Well, guess who was murdering his leg mid-fight? Cheeto. He was
Yeah.
kicking it, and then
Hmm.
Sean O'Malley was throwing it wildly, and Marlon was checking every one of them. Not every one of them, but the ones that mattered. And I can't help but think that was maybe Sean's fault and not just a freak accident. You know what I'm saying? I really don't think that was a freak accident that lost him the fight. So very
So
fun to see him his hype train get derailed a little bit.
I was gonna say, do you think Sean O'Malley is just a hype train, or do you think he has what it takes to be like a serious bantamweight
I do
contender?
think he has what it takes to be a serious bantamweight contender. I just don't think he has what it takes now. It's kind of like my opinion towards Greg Hardy. I mean, he's a great fighter when you're fighting cans and mid-level fighters and gatekeepers, but when you're fighting like top of the line, top 15 fighters, I don't know. It freaks me out. He knocked out Eddie Wineland recently, but
Right.
Eddie's kind of he's getting old. He's not in his prime at all. So does Sean O'Malley have great talent, great potential? Of course. Does he also have a body that breaks on command? Yes. It's going to be tough for him to get up there in the bantamweight rankings when you have a body that betrays you. Look what happened to Cain Velasquez. Look what happened to Dominic Cruz. These people that often suffer these injuries every day, let's just say. Sean wakes up with a broken toe every other hour. How do you sustain a fighting career like that? Look at Dominic Cruz. He can't fight. Every time he tries to fight, he just gets injured. It's a real shame. And this man's what, like 18 years old? He's like fresh out of the womb. How the hell is he gonna be 18 years old or 20 or 21, whatever he is, and get these injuries like this? That only gets worse with age. So I think that Sean O'Malley has a beautiful chance at reaching the top of the bantamweight division. I just think that there's a lot of cards stacked against him, and I don't think that
Okay.
they are necessarily not his fault. I think he genetically is great, but I think genetically he's something wrong with him. His body's just frail. If that's a
You think he
training
needs to
thing,
drink more milk?
yes, if it's a training thing, then he
More
can he could fix
calcium?
that. But if it's not a training thing and he's just prone to injury, how is he gonna rise up to the top without Dana White giving him some special favors and letting him skip the division a little bit? You feel me?
Yeah, you make a good point. It is concerning that he is already having this many problems with serious injury. Like if it wasn't for dumb fight IQ in that one fight against I can't even remember
Yeah,
who,
he would have lost that.
he would have lost.
Yeah.
Give it for pretty much the exact same reason. A leg goes out and he can't walk, and then he gets ground and pounded to oblivion. But yeah, it is concerning. He's a
Yeah.
young guy, and he's having a lot of injury
He's having old
problems.
man problems that he shouldn't be having, and it's only going to get much worse. And what happens when you put him against someone like Jose Aldo, who is a leg specialist?
Oh,
This man chops trees
oh,
with his legs.
no,
He's not going to
no.
survive someone like Jose.
Jose would absolutely butcher him.
And I don't
But
think
I
Jose's
mean,
going to make the
that's
same problem mistake that he made with Conor. He's not going to rush in. I think he learned his lesson. He's going to patiently
nah.
wait and exploit his disadvantages, just as any fighter will with Sean O'Malley.
Yeah, Jose is an incredibly intelligent fighter. Yeah, I mean, nowhere near. Sean O'Malley is nowhere near that level yet. But
in like 5 years, definitely.
Well, I don't think Jose's going to be fighting in 5 years.
No, I don't either. I just think Sean O'Malley. I think within the next 5 years, he's going to be top 10. I don't think
Okay.
if he tried it now, I don't think he'd have success. But he's got super impressive talent that I don't think he'll put to waste if he can overcome his his issues.
Right.
So yeah, that's my take on it.
Okay. I have another train wreck for you.
Let's hear it.
Not Tony Ferguson. I feel like we've talked about.
We've
Tony
roasted
Ferguson
Tony enough.
Yeah. We've talked about Tyron Woodley enough. I think. A young prospect, up and coming prospect, who got his hype train absolutely derailed by a veteran, and his name's Edmund Shabazian. Derek Brunson puts on a clinic against this guy, and a fight that probably should have been stopped way sooner than it was. Because I mean, you have a young guy here who is just, his talent is just starting to get molded, and you know he's taking unnecessary damage in a fight he is destined to lose. So you might as well just throw in the towel. But you know, train wreck. To call Edmund Shabazian's loss to Derek Brunson a train wreck is obviously an overstatement. But it's definitely I don't know what you want.
It's a derail.
A bit of a derailing.
It's not the train's fault. It's the foundation's fault.
But doesn't a train wreck when it derails? Like, where does it go? Like, it's gonna flip and tumble, and it's gonna be all this awful, you know, accident. Like, I guess saying a train derailing and a train wrecking is kind of the same thing, right?
Yeah, you're right.
But yeah, I mean, rough year for Edmund Shabazian when he you know, just takes that absolute beating against Derek Brunson. I would say one of the biggest, if not the biggest, upset of 2020, next to probably Tony and Justin. But yeah, as far as train wrecks go, I would put Maurice Green in that category. In his loss to Greg Hardy, I would put Greg Hardy in that category. In his loss to Marcin Tybura just very recently.
You're forgetting somebody.
Who am I?
Another person that Greg Hardy defeated. One of my favorite fighters in the roster. Juan Adams.
I thought that's what you were gonna say, but I couldn't remember if that was 2020 or 2019.
I don't know either, but it counts.
Yeah, rough time for Juan Adams. Gets brutalized and then kind of throws a fit about it and then gets cut.
Not the best look, but I still love you. You're still my favorite fighter ever. You know, we're here for you.
I do like Juan Adams.
I do too. Actually,
I actually do like him.
Just he is a little bit of a meme, but I do like him.
Hey, I mean, he's a funny guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, I think we've done enough on this category. Okay. I don't feel good about myself.
All right. We're gonna.
I don't feel good about this.
We're gonna move on.
I don't feel good about this roast job that we're doing. Let's see, another big train wreck. I'm just continuing.
It's fun,
anyway.
Isn't it?
Another big train wreck I thought was Alexander Volkanovski and Max Holloway. Train wreck in the sense that I think the judges got it wrong, and I think Alexander Volkanovski lost the fight.
I agree.
I think maybe it's a little strong to say it's a robbery. I know I've said that in the past on this podcast, but yeah, I don't know. I think Max Holloway should be your featherweight champ right now. But whatever. You know, what are you gonna do? It was a close fight. What should be our last category?
I would say the best fights that we are seeing in 2021.
Oh, so like it's fights we're most excited about.
Yeah, or we can go to
Okay.
best comebacks of 2020.
See,
There's not
I don't
many,
know if
and
I don't know if I have a ton for that. I would
yeah,
say my favorite comeback of 2020 was probably, and it's not a comeback in the fight itself, but a kind of a
yeah,
career comeback. Brian Ortega,
yeah. I have the
coming
yeah,
back after that 2 year layoff, and just getting absolutely brutalized by Max Holloway, taking 2 years off, and then coming back bald and looking like a new fighter, both both appearance wise and his fighting
it's like
style
Max
looks.
Payne.
Yeah, like Max Payne.
He just comes in bald now, and he's just so it's a
Yeah,
different level.
yeah. Throws that whiskey bottle against the
Yeah,
wall, says, "I'm gonna take on the Brazilian Air Force or whatever." Yeah, that's a Max Payne 3 for anyone that's wondering. But great game, highly recommend it. But yeah, Brian Ortega, I think, had the best comeback story of 2020. I would put Cody Garbrandt up there.
yep,
He came back against Rafael Assunção and looked terrific. I say came back against Rafael Assunção. I should rephrase that because it's not like he was losing the fight against Rafael Assunção and came back. I
right.
mean, kind of a career comeback. Came back after a loss, not looking too great, and then comes into this new fight and looks good again. That's essentially what I mean by comeback.
I would say I don't know if I don't know if this is even the right opponent, but it's Beneil Dariush and Scott Holtzman. Is that what it was? I forget.
Beneil Dariush,
Or was
and
it?
I think you're
I'm thinking of.
Drakkar Close.
Yeah.
Is that the fight
Yeah,
you're
yeah, yeah,
thinking
yeah. That's
of?
the one. That's the one.
Beneil got a sick
Yeah,
knockout
after
against.
getting blasted. Yeah.
Yeah,
But not much to talk about. Just I'm real excited to see Beneil in the future and his endeavors. But yeah, he had a great
he
comeback versus him.
he did fight Scott Holtzman, but I don't think that's the fight
Yeah.
you're
No,
thinking
yeah,
of.
I'm
That
thinking of
that
the
was
other
his
one.
most recent fight, but he had a good comeback against Drakkar Close and got that knockout that with Anik and DC and Rogan, the
Uh-huh.
the meme one
Oh
that
yeah.
everyone
Oh yeah.
you always see where DC's like falling on top of Rogan. That was the Beneil Dariush
And it
knockout.
was well deserved on their part.
Yeah, good, terrific,
But yeah,
terrific.
I'm a huge fan of him too.
Yeah,
Oh
I like
no.
Beneil Dariush. Dude, Willow loves Beneil
Oh
Dariush.
no.
Oh no. Willie Willie is the biggest train wreck of 2020, everyone. She's in a rage right now. All right, well, I'm taking over. This is my show now.
You got it, Kyle.
So, is it all me?
We could do. Do you
Oh,
want to do best fights of 2021,
yeah,
or did
yeah.
you want
Fights were.
to?
Well, there's two things I want to do.
Okay.
I want to do our fights we're most looking forward to in 2021, which won't be a super long category. Then I want to go through every division and say who you think the champ is going to be in
Oh, this is
2021.
exciting. Oh.
Yeah. But first, what fights are you looking forward to come 2021?
So I don't think this is ever going to happen, but obviously
Oh,
Kamzat versus Edwards, it's cursed. We know that now. It's a cursed fight, but I still want to see it.
okay.
That's when you learn if Kamzat is actually as good as we think he is, because Leon Edwards, though is very inactive, is very very skilled and talented, and I think he'll give Kamzat a problem. Not sure though. Hopefully that sometime happens. I don't know. Other than that, I'm very excited to see Hooker versus Chandler. I mean, how could you not be excited to
Yes.
see that? That's a legendary matchup right there. I don't know who's gonna win that. I would give it to Dan Hooker just because he seems to definitely have the edge in the striking department, and I've seen Chandler get knocked out quite recently, like about a year ago, I think. So I know his chin is great, but it could be cracked by someone like Dan Hooker, especially with a
Hmm.
knee or something like that. And Dan is he's good at the anti wrestling strikes. Other
Yes.
than that, I would have to say that Jones versus any heavyweight is going to be a great time
Ooh,
because
yeah.
obviously that's going to answer a ton of questions. And every matchup in the heavyweight division for Jones is going to be exciting. I don't care if you give him Alexei Oleinik; it's going to be a good time.
Hmm.
And then I would say who else? Dustin Poirier and Connor too. That's a given. I mean, who's not excited about that? Casual fan or hardcore fans alike.
Hmm.
That's a banger. Yeah, I would say those are my most looked forward to fights and aspects of MMA. How about you?
Um, so we have Derek Brunson taking on Kevin Holland in March. Very excited about that. That just got announced somewhat recently. Um, and then another fight I'm really looking forward to is Jan Blachowicz, Israel Adesanya for the light heavyweight championship. A fight that I am just shocked is happening. Like, it just seems weird to me that this is Like, it's just strange, and it's so strange that I'm hyped for it. And then the ones you said, Dustin and Connor, obviously going to be awesome. 6 years later, Dustin Poirier, seemingly a new fighter. Conor McGregor, uh, always a fun time to watch. Uh, Dustin coming off, both guys really coming off just terrific striking performances. It's going to be fun. Dustin Poirier, Conor McGregor is going to be a fun time. Uh, and then I don't know that this will necessarily happen. I really hope it does, but uh, Jorge Masvidal, Kobe Covington, I think is going to be a lot. The build up to that is going to be a
Oh,
lot of fun. Now, do I think it's going to be like this insane striking match? Nah, maybe. Now that I'm thinking about it, maybe because that's what it was against Usman, Colby and Usman. I mean, but now I'm thinking about it, and I think Colby is gonna wrestle the shit out of Masvidal, kind of the way he did to Tyron Woodley, the way Colby did to Tyron Woodley. So that could be a really really interesting fight. Maybe not the most exciting, but uh, I just think Colby Covington is just so terrific, and I absolutely love watching that guy. So I would love to see him take on Masvidal in 2021. But biggest hype right now, Jan and Israel, because that's just such a weird matchup to me. Like it's so strange. So I'm so down for it.
it's just it's so unbelievable that it's just it's gonna be great. I'm
Yeah,
ready.
John Jones moving up to heavyweight, Israel moving up to light
Yeah, I love
heavyweight.
this
Weird,
stuff. I love it.
weird times going on. But Matthew,
It's
now
time.
it's time to talk about our 2021 champions.
Should we
So
start at flyweight and go up, or the opposite? What do you want to do?
we'll start at flyweight.
Okay.
All right, who's your flyweight champ in 2021?
So, as much as I think Brandon Moreno has a huge chance of becoming champion, I don't see him defeating Davison just because of Davison's freakishly huge power. And I know Brandon Moreno hits like a truck too. He obviously stunned Davison, but I don't see Davison getting knocked out by him or defeated by him in the rematch. I just think he's got too much going for him, and I think he'll make the adjustments with the proper training camp to defeat Brandon for the rematch. So I say Davison Figueiredo is your flyweight champion in 2020.
I agree. I also think Davison Figueiredo is going to remain flyweight champ. I think Brandon Moreno is going to give him a tough rematch, but ultimately I think he'll come out victorious. And after that, I don't know, dude. I don't know who do
Just
you take on
keep having
fucking
rematches over and over again.
Joey B for the third time? Like I
Fuck
don't
it,
know.
yeah. I'd love to
Um,
see it, but I'm afraid for him. I really am.
what about at
That's
bantamweight,
this is where it gets
Matthew?
a little more difficult to decide because we just saw
Yes,
someone like Rob Font obliterate Marlon Moraes, who was thought to be the best of the best in bantamweight. So this is tough. And Aljamain Sterling was supposed to get the title fight, correct? He's number one.
I think he will be the next. If that's not booked already, it's gonna be. He's gonna take on Peter Yan.
I really like Aljamain. I'm gonna say Aljamain defeats Peter Yan and takes the crown in bantamweight. I'm gonna go off the rails a little
I
bit.
agree.
I
No, I agree. I think Aljamain Sterling is your next bantamweight champion. I
Yeah,
think he might submit Peter Yan.
like Peter Yan's cool, but he's no personality, and he's a brick
That's
wall.
not what we're basing this off, Matt.
That's true.
We're not basing this off personality, but regardless, I agree. Aljamain Sterling, I think, is your next bantamweight champion.
At the same time, though, Peter Yan is pretty cool because he's like the Terminator. but he doesn't speak at all. He just kind of destroys people silently. You know what I mean? So at the same time, it's kind of cool. So, but yeah,
Okay.
I feel bad for roasting Peter now, or Piotr, because like he's not that bad of a guy. He's just shy. He's not like a like like I shouldn't roast him for that. All right, but yeah, okay. So Aljamain Sterling and Davison Figueiredo, flyweight and bantamweight champs. Featherweight. This is where it gets even harder. I don't see Max Holloway losing another title fight. But now you have someone like Brian Ortega who discovered how to throw punches now. I still don't think he defeats Max Holloway.
Okay.
I gotta go with Max Holloway. It's a safe bet, and it's a proven bet. I honestly think he'll defeat Volkanovski eventually, or whoever takes his title.
I agree.
Oh my
once
god!
again, once again,
Get this guy out here. All right,
Max Holloway
all
is
right.
my pick for 2021 featherweight champion.
You do the next one, so you can stop copying me. I'll copy you now.
Lightweight. This might be the hardest
Yeah.
one.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh god. Fuck.
So let's assume Habib doesn't come back.
Okay.
Let's
That's
assume
fair. That's fair.
let's assume he vacates the title. He's done. He's retired. I think your next lightweight champion is Dustin Poirier.
I could see it.
Was that who you were
I
gonna
would
say?
have to say it's Justin Gaethje.
Oh,
I think
this guy.
I think Justin's newfound style is just too much for a lot of people. And as much as I love Dustin, I mean, that's a tough fight, but I think Justin would likely edge it just based on his wrestling credentials. That would kind of like, I know he doesn't use it a lot, but if something ever happened, he would obviously have an escape plan to get out of any danger. And I don't think Dustin has that luxury, even though I think Dustin might be the better striker. I would have to give that to Justin, because I think
Okay.
Dustin's the number two. Like, if Justin wasn't here, I'd give it to Dustin, definitely. Not
Okay.
because they rhyme, but so yeah, okay.
I kind of thought you were gonna say Charles Oliveira.
The striking is just, I don't think you'd be able to take someone like Justin down though.
Okay.
That's the thing. I think Charles could take Poirier down, but I don't think he could take Justin down. Because I know you watched Justin get obliterated by Habib, but that's Habib. That's a
Yeah,
different type of
Habib's
wrestling.
an anomaly.
Charles is going to use BJJ and, I hate to say it, American style wrestling, if he does choose to do that. And that's a much different animal than like Dagestani and
Well, you
what is
saw Charles Oliveira slam Tony Ferguson
Tony Ferguson is
multiple
also
times.
7 pounds. He's very light. Justin comes in the octagon much heavier than Tony Ferguson,
Okay.
and he's got much better
Okay.
takedown defense. See, the thing about Tony, he doesn't have takedown defense in the way that you'd think, because he often wants to get taken down. If Kevin Lee shoots for a takedown, that benefits Tony Ferguson. So I think he focuses less on preventing the ground as he does on the ground. So when you don't focus on preventing the ground attacks like that, like a takedown, and I thought ground attacks, it sounds so weird. When you focus less on takedown defense and more on BJJ and fighting off your back against a guy who can fight, better than you can on the ground, you're going to have a bad time. But someone like Justin Gaethje, if he were to take Tony down, I think that would be better for Tony. You know what I mean? So I don't think that I really don't think that Oliveira would have a good time taking down Gaethje. It's possible. Obviously, he's a wrestler and a half, great BJJ artist, but I still think Gaethje would snatch that victory.
Okay. I'll go first again on welterweight.
We'll take turns in
since,
threes.
Since you don't want me copying you, I think Kamaru Usman stays your welterweight champ in
Ooh,
2021.
another different. Oof. Okay, I think Gilbert Burns beats
Gilbert
Kamaru
Burns. I
Usman.
knew you were gonna say that.
I love Gilbert. He's one of my top guys.
Okay.
But how does COVID affect him? That's a serious thing. Like, people that get COVID still have trouble breathing months and months and months after. It's
a fair point.
That's
yeah.
a big thing you got to worry about in a 5-round fight in a sport that's so demanding on your cardiovascular system. Even if that affects him a little bit, it's going to be a huge disadvantage. So I would say second choice is definitely Kamaru, though.
Okay. Now at middleweight, it gets weird.
This gets
So middleweight, I think Robert Whittaker is going to be middleweight champ in 2021. Not because I think he beats Israel Adesanya. I think Israel Adesanya stays at light heavyweight. Okay, so spoiler alert. I
Oh
think Israel
no!
Adesanya. I think Israel Adesanya is your next light heavyweight champ in 2021. Israel Adesanya is going to beat Jan Blachowicz at light heavyweight. He's going to take the light heavyweight strap, and he's going to be a double champ, middleweight, light heavyweight. But then eventually, it's going to get to the point where he has to vacate one of them. He's going to vacate middleweight, stay at light heavyweight, and then Whittaker is going to fight someone else, maybe.
Paulo, I think he's fighting next.
Yeah.
He beat Till and Cannonier, and that's the only other person I would assume. Maybe Marvin. No.
Yeah. Whoever, I think Whittaker beats him.
Yeah.
I don't think Whittaker beats Israel, but I think he beats whoever else. And I think Robert Whittaker is your middleweight champ in 2021.
Hear me out.
Israel Adesanya is your light heavyweight
Hear
champ
me out.
in 2021.
Adesanya vacates the belt. Paulo Costa fights Robert Whittaker for the belt.
Okay.
Paulo Costa wins the belt.
No.
Israel comes back and assassinates Paulo again and reclaims the belt. Israel Adesanya is your next champion. I would say the same. I'd say Robert Whittaker.
I would hate that.
Yeah, I would say Whittaker gets the belt again. Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
He's just too good of a fighter to lose.
So you know my pick for light heavyweight. It's Israel Adesanya. Who is your light heavyweight champ in 2021?
You know, Ryan Spann has never been my favorite fighter, but he is the champion at light heavyweight in 2021. Nah, I'm just kidding.
Who's your actual pick?
It's a tough one. It really is. But I got to go with Israel. How could you not go with Israel? Like, Jan is awesome, but he's slower than a lot of guys that Israel's fought and successfully, had great head movement against. I don't think that Jan is going to be able to land on Israel like people think. I just don't think he's going to get hit. And I think he'll definitely win against Jan and take the belt. I didn't think that as much recently, but after watching a lot of Israel fights and watching him against faster people than Jan, I just don't see how he's going to land. I don't know. It's a tough one, but I give it to Israel.
Okay.
Moving on to heavyweight. Oh boy, this is tough. John Jones.
John Jones. Okay, let me tell you what I think.
Okay.
I think Stipe fights Francis. Stipe beats Francis. Stipe retires. And then Francis fights Curtis Blades and becomes champion.
That's solid.
And then John Jones comes in and takes it.
I don't know.
That's a solid.
I like that. That seems plausible.
I think the belt at heavyweight is going to do some jumping around.
Yeah.
In 2021.
Especially if Stipe leaves. Oh, and now that Cormier's gone.
I tend to think Stipe is going to retire in 2021. I just have that feeling. Stipe doesn't strike me as the kind of guy that loves to fight.
No.
I don't get the impression that he loves being there. I get the impression that he's very good at it, and he knows he's very good at it, and he likes to dominate, and it's a way for him to make a living for his family. But there's so much that goes along with it that I think he fucking hates. I think he hates anything to do with the press, anything to do with the media. I don't think he likes the stardom, the fame, any of that. I just don't. He's not that. He doesn't strike me as that kind of guy. He's very like blue collar kind of, simple. I say simple. That sounds insulting, but he's just like he's a family dude. He's a firefighter. He's not Israel Adesanya. He's not going out there to captivate audiences. He's there to do his job, and I think he's getting to the point where I don't think he enjoys it all that much, to be honest with you. Yeah. He just doesn't strike me as the kind of guy that really enjoys it. I love him. I think he's great. I think he's a terrific fighter, and I think he knows he's a terrific fighter, and I think he knows he can beat any heavyweight in the world. But I think he's kind of just
burnt out.
Biding his time. I think he's just fighting when he can, and when he's done, he's done. So heavyweight is tough. Heavyweight's really tough. I think it's going to be Stipe for a while. Then I think it might go to John Jones. I wouldn't be surprised if Francis ends up with it at some point. I don't know,
There's so
man.
many
Heavyweight's
good
tough.
contenders here, and you never know who's going to retire. So yeah.
Yeah.
Now the next 4 divisions. Oh no. Whiskers. All right, Willow's going to join in on this one. So for women's strawweight, I really don't see anyone beating Wei Li. I mean maybe Rose, but Wei Li's just so good. I love watching her fight. I love how technical she is. I don't know. That's a tough one. And Joanna, I mean I don't see her beating her in a rematch again. I think it'll be competitive, but I think Wei Li is the top contender here and the champion. I say
I
top
don't
contender
think-
and champion in the same sentence. That doesn't work. You know what I mean.
I think your women's titles don't move.
Yeah, I
in
didn't want to say
2021.
it, but I didn't want to like go over all of them at once, but I honestly agree with you.
I
I
don't
think
think
they
your
change.
women's titles move.
So let's just
But-
assume that they all retire. Let's just do that. Let's take them out of the equation to make it a little more interesting.
Okay, well, I was about to say I legitimately think Amanda will retire
Yeah.
in 2021. I think she's done in 2021. And then women's bantamweight, it might go to Jermaine Durandamy. It might go to Holly Holm.
I want to say Holly Holm. I love Holly.
And then women's featherweight, dude, I have no idea. Megan Anderson, I guess. Maybe Tatiana Suarez. I don't know.
I'd say Megan, but I don't know.
Yeah.
That's
You
really
don't have
rough.
a ton of options.
You don't really. Flyweight.
And then-
Jessica
Yeah,
Andrade. See, Jessica's great, but she has a game plan that could defeat her. And that's just stay at range and fight her like Valentina does, which is not easier said than done. But I guess I'd go with Andrade as the top dog in this division. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't think the title goes anywhere. I think it stays with Shevchenko.
I mean, if
for the-
Shevchenko retires, I mean.
Damn. Lauren Murphy, maybe? I have no idea, dude. Roxanne Modafferi hasn't looked terrible
Yeah,
lately.
yeah.
She put on a good performance over Macy Barber.
But yeah, overall they're gonna stay the same. That's the general
I
consensus
think
here.
they're pretty much going to stay the same.
Yeah.
I think, and then I think Amanda will retire near the end of 2021, and her 2 titles will be in limbo for a little bit.
Nobody deserves them.
No, I mean, I don't know, dude. Like it's tough.
Hopefully these divisions get a little more competition in 2021. I think they will.
I wouldn't be surprised if Irene Aldana takes on either Holly Holm or GDR for the bantamweight title
Yeah.
if Amanda
I
retires.
can see that.
And yeah, those might be your next champions. That is it. That is the Caffeinated Combat 2020
Awards
recap.
show.
The awards show. Yeah, okay.
We forgot
You
to
can call
give
it
these
that.
people half of the contenders awards, but that's okay.
Oh, shit.
Oh well.
We'll mail them out.
Yeah,
we'll FedEx them.
We'll one day air them. Don't worry.
I'll start building them today.
I appreciate it.
Yeah,
You have fun with that,
building
okay?
the trophies. Yeah, get right on it.
All right, that will be all for today.
That's the Christmas special.
That's the Christmas special. I think it was only the 4th or 5th Christmas special, or 3rd. I don't know.
3rd or 4th.
We'll just keep growing with them. Don't
It's
worry
beginning
about
to
that.
look a lot like Christmas.
It
That's
really
all I'll
is.
say.
The snow's on the ground.
January
ready to go.
4th.
You know,
It was a good year, Matthew.
I think it was a good year. it's growing.
With the birth of this podcast in 2020. That was the real
The
award.
real
All the awards go to us. We're
Anthony
actually
Smith. You've birthed the podcast. Thank you.
He did. Glover Teixeira and Anthony Smith birthed the podcast, and then Alistair Overeem and
And Alistair stole it.
yeah. What was the Alistair fight? It was like our first or second.
Walt
podcast.
Harris. Right.
Yes. Yeah. Walt Harris. You're right. Damn. So many moons ago.
I know.
Matthew.
So many moons ago. Good times.
Been a good year.
That will be all.
Been a good year.
Has been
Actually,
good.
it hasn't been a good year. What am I fucking saying? It's been a terrible year, but it's been fun.
But
I've had
it's been
fun.
a fun year for MMA.
Yeah.
Everything else, not so much.
I'm glad I didn't die. I'm glad you didn't die. We didn't
Can't
yet.
say the same to you.
Adios.
Just kidding. I love you. Okay, bye.